All right, fantastic. Good afternoon. I'm Thielman. I'm the Chief Information and Digital Officer at Scripps Health in San Diego, California. So pleased to be with you. A little background on Scripps. We're a not-for-profit integrated delivery network. We span the county of San Diego, which is about a population of 3 million people and stretches from the southern or the border of Mexico all the way up to Camp Pendleton and the border of Orange County. So you can see all of the kind of key vitals here, but a large player in the community and a growing organization. Really very much focused on our culture. And I'm really proud of how we're contributing to our community and continuing to serve. And I'll take just a minute and talk about culture because I think that's one of the key messages that you've heard in both John and Aaron's presentation. And I think it's really vital to how we're enabling uh, care model transformation and through the use of technology and data and analytics. And so today I'm going to focus my discussion really around three ways in which we're striving for that at Scripps. One is through our Scripps Health Operations and Command Center. Two is through various digital and virtual use cases, really focused on how we engage consumers and patients of Scripps. And then I'll talk a little bit as well about artificial intelligence. So I'll start with the Scripps Health Operations and Command Center. This is really something that we've been working on for the last several years at Scripps. And really the underlying concept here is how do we create more systemness? How do we share best practices, do it more rapidly, and really get the benefits of sharing those practices across the organization more uniformly. And the background here, of course, is that like NASA back in the 50s and 60s, which really pioneered the concept of a command center, which was focused around really two things. One, how to improve the speed and accuracy of decision making, in this case for space missions, by bringing together all of the key decision makers and really democratizing access to data and information to help inform those decisions. And we, like many other healthcare organizations, have really borrowed from that construct and begun to really build from the bedside back to an administrative area in our organization, the concept of a healthcare command center. And so we launched this work about 3 to 4 years ago. We built a governance structure that brought together physician leaders, hospital administrators, ambulatory administrators, as well as some of our senior leadership in the organization. And we started to identify priorities that would really help us drive more value and be able to do it faster. And so those programs are listed here, and those with the asterisks are areas that we've actually focused on implementing this command center model. And you can see an example of that on the far right. This is our centralized telemetry function where we took really independent telemetry monitoring that was occurring at each of our 5 hospital campuses. We brought together our telemetry technicians, our management team, and we said, what can we do to think differently about the way in which we deliver telemetry services? We have huge variation in terms of telemetry tech to patient ratios based on facility. We have different standards for how we onboard and train our telemetry technicians. We have different ways in which we manage equipment. All of these are huge opportunities through standardization to deliver more value. And so the result of that was to ultimately centralize our telemetry technicians, move to a single instance of a telemetry platform for the organization, and then to really unify our staffing standards. And the net of that has really been also enabling a different way of communicating in real time with our physicians and nurses. And so this is just a glimpse into what that looks like at Scripps today. Maybe not quite as fancy as the NASA example on the left, but I think what this is really about is Again, how are we delivering more value and how are we using the technology, the tools, and the data and the information that we have available to promote that? And it's really created a virtuous cycle. This year, we're actually focusing ourselves around sort of two key areas. The first is how can we help improve the pre-surgical experience for our patients, whether that's elective surgeries or procedures that occur in our hospitals or ambulatory surgical centers. We are blessed to have incredibly deep patient engagement with our patient portal, which is Epic, MyChart. We've rebranded that as MyScripts. Over 80% of our patients are actively engaged. That's about 1 million patients in interacting with us through the patient portal, whether that's scheduling an appointment, paying a bill, checking in. And what we hadn't done is really oriented ourselves to the fact that these same patients are actually getting some of this more complex care in the organization. And so what we did is we sort of said, what are we doing today? And then how can we really sort of accomplish three objectives? One, how can we help improve predictability of the experience for our patients? Two, how do we start to reduce controllable cancellations? Uh, our ORs, our ambulatory surgical centers, our procedural volume, these are huge contributors to revenue and ultimately to margin in our organization, which is really important to continue to drive our mission. And so anytime that we have a patient that no-shows, there's a real cost to that. And of course, there's also a clinical concern with regard to them not getting access to their care. And so we've started to implement some changes locally that will, by the end of this calendar year, result in our pre-surgical evaluation team becoming part of our command center. But those includes things like allowing patients to schedule their pre-surgical evaluation appointments online, allowing them to provide information to us in advance of that nurse visit that occurs virtually now, which really enables us to condense the time frame in which we're interacting with the patient, which has really been quite a satisfier from a patient perspective. And then more predictability as well. The other aspect of this is the clinical aspect, which is really bringing together our surgeons as well as our anesthesiologists and unifying all of our pre-op testing and anesthesia management guidelines. And there was some variability in that, which was contributing to differences in the way in which we were managing patients across our different sites of care. And then part of this as well, which is a bit adjacent, was also recognizing that we have this huge opportunity. We have a very distributed model in how we do post-discharge outreach today. We use technology and tools to connect with patients and then to escalate them, but we don't have a single owner in the organization for managing those escalations. And so what we were finding is that we weren't getting back to our patients in a timely manner. And so again, another great candidate for how we can take these clinical activities, really create economies of scale through a centralized function and be able to deliver more back to the organization, which really does contribute in this case to reducing readmissions and making sure that we're getting patients to their follow-up appointments, getting them access to medications and so forth. And so we're really sort of feeding two birds with one hand in this example. But these are just some illustrations really of how we're using the command center, our digital and virtual capabilities, as well as data and information to help promote really continuous improvement. All right, I'll pivot to talk a little bit about digital and virtual in our organization. I've talked a little bit already about really how activated, engaged our patients are in using our digital and virtual capabilities. When we kind of think about reimagining access to care, we're a very traditional hospital-based healthcare system. We have a huge ambulatory footprint, but really the bread and butter of our organization in terms of what drives our overall operating margin and profitability is what happens in our hospitals. Clearly, what happens in the ambulatory environment contributes to admissions and contributes to some of the procedural volume that I mentioned previously. With the advent of COVID, I think we had done about 250 virtual visits. And as part of that transition, what we've actually seen, of course, during COVID was a huge adoption of telemedicine, which was great from a clinical continuity standpoint. But as we've sort of moved beyond COVID, what we've observed is that about 1/5 or 20% of our ambulatory visits today are continuing to be delivered using telemedicine. And I share that we just achieved a milestone earlier this calendar year, which was we delivered our 2 millionth telemedicine visit. Um, it's not so much the volume, I think, that's important, it's really the impact. And so let's just kind of talk about that for a moment. This is very much a patient-centered care model. It allows patients to get access from wherever they are, which is really quite important when we think about the disruption and sometimes the likelihood that a patient will no-show for an appointment because they can't break away from work. There's travel considerations, there's parking, there's all of these things that need to happen in order for a patient to get to an appointment. And not all appointments need to be delivered in person. I think two is really the efficiency. What we see is that in our virtual visits, these tend to be more efficient appointments, both from a patient standpoint, less time waiting, but also more direct contact with our physicians. And then I think third is we're seeing equal to, if not better than, patient satisfaction. And what you heard in Aaron's presentation with regards to ambient listening, we see a slight bump overall in terms of our performance on our Press Ganey scores for our patients that are engaged in telemedicine visits. So where has this been helpful? About 35% of all of our primary care visits are delivered virtually. We're continuing to expand the inventory of appointments that are available to be scheduled online. We're at about 45% today of all appointments at Scripps can be scheduled online, but it also tells you that we have a lot of room to continue to grow that inventory of appointments. And, I think it becomes really important because what we really want is to democratize access, whether you're a patient, whether you're a scheduler, whether you're a clinician, to have the same visibility into that inventory of appointments and create that optionality. And so we're really proud of what we're doing in the telemedicine space, and then the role and relationship of that as well into the ability to schedule appointments online. I think thematically, I've touched on a few of these already, more indirectly. We see digital health continuing to play a very important role in patient experience and in care. And it's really about how are we enabling our patient and consumer experience using digital tools. I think there's really three key themes. The first is we really want to tackle the friction that's just naturally built into our healthcare system here in the United States. And so really what that means is that it means making it easier for people to find and use our services. And so I talked a little bit about that in my earlier comments. Two is really around personalization. And so not everybody wants to have a digital experience, and we understand and respect that, but we also want to understand and know that so that we do know what our patient preferences are. And so we want to respect the preferences of our patients. We want to understand their different needs, their motivations, and their expectations of the services that they're using. Digital tends to be highly desirable, and I think it spans all demographics. We don't see any distinction between our younger patients and those that are over 65. In fact, what we actually see is that our patients over 65 are even more apt to message with our care team and to perform certain functions. And so we really want to be sure that we're tailoring that digital experience to our individual patients. And then lastly is navigation. I think the United States healthcare system, even as somebody that's worked in healthcare for over 20 years, it is incredibly challenging if you have a complex diagnosis to understand how to navigate to different appointments, different tests, and how to make that all happen in a timely fashion. And so we've really tried to focus on how can we utilize our digital tools, whether that's our patient portal, whether that's our website, whether that's other digital mediums that we make available, to really try to enable patients to be able to navigate successfully and really make that akin to other digital experiences and other interactions like in banking or retail. And so I think these are really important themes that we continue to use to really drive the why behind the continuation and the sort of growth and enablement of our digital footprint, and really that it is a vehicle to help improve not only patient experience, but really meet patients where they are and tailor that experience to them based on their individual needs and preferences. All right, so I will wrap up with just some comments in general about AI. I think you've heard some great examples already from both John and Aaron, and we share, I think, sort of similar areas of focus in terms of specific capabilities that we're bringing online. I think what's fascinating to me is just stepping back and recognizing that generative AI in and of itself has really reached mass adoption at historic speeds, faster than personal computers and the internet, and really a fraction of the time. And so what's really interesting is I think healthcare is actually very much leaning in as an industry here in the United States, and I imagine globally as well. But we're doing it in a stepwise fashion because we have to be focused around ensuring that there's guardrails, that we understand how the AI was developed, how to deploy it safely, and then how to scale it. The reality is that consumers are experimenting with AI much more freely. And that actually has an implication because I think it actually puts some additional responsibility on us as technology leaders, as enablers in our organizations, because our patients are using generative AI and other AI solutions to make sense of their health information, and they're really showing up to their appointments AI informed. At the same time that AI is dominating the headlines, there's bold predictions every day. There is a widening gap that we're starting to see in terms of AI adoption and outcomes. And so being very intentional and deliberate around the AI solutions that we're introducing in the organization becomes really important. I think that that gap can really be explained, one, based on the fact that AI adoption's faster and more uneven than many of the previous major technologies that we referenced previously. But I really like this concept that the reality with new technology is that it's slower than the promises and more complex than the predictions. So what does that all mean? You heard a little bit about governance. We've put together a governance structure. When I think about governance, I really think about four things. I think about trust. What is what are we trying to accomplish with the AI? How do we know that it's safe? Do we understand how it was developed? Do we understand how it's going to operate in our environment? Think about value. What's the problem that we're trying to solve by introducing the technology? How does it knit into workflow? How do we ensure that we're not creating a more onerous set of conditions for our clinical and operations workforce in terms of interacting with that technology? Safety, of course, is a major consideration. How do we ensure that we're not causing harm, that we're not creating reputational risk for the organization? And so governance is really in place to help us understand those considerations and make decisions in a way that really allows us to grow with the technology, but do so with not just the guardrails, but really with the understanding that we have to deliver on improvements. And some of those are going to be more indirect in terms of tackling cognitive burden, giving clinicians more time back in face-to-face interactions with patients and direct patient care. Personalization. There's going to be more and more patient-facing AI that our organizations are making available and introducing. And I think there's going to be huge value because that's going to build loyalty and it's going to build trust with our patient communities. But really, I think what we also have to be able to demonstrate over time is that we're improving clinical outcomes and we're driving financial return. And I think that has historically been a challenge with healthcare IT to do that consistently. And so what that really means is that we have to make conscientious decisions and understand the opportunity cost of doing one thing and not doing another. And so that has been a big area of focus for our organization in terms of governance. I'll just wrap up. I think underlying all of this, we are creating an AI-enabled workplace, and we're doing this in all of our organizations, whether we're doing it with intention or not. AI only really works if we trust it enough to use it. And so that goes back to governance. I think there's really three interlocking challenges that we're confronting as an organization related to AI adoption. The first is uncertainty. I think we have a workforce at times that can be hesitant about what AI will do and what it means in the context of day-to-day work. That uncertainty usually comes in the form of skepticism, which we invite because it allows us to engage in a dialogue. Fear of replacement. I think this is very real concern. We're hearing about it not just in healthcare, but across all industries. And we're even seeing it manifest itself in terms of some of the large technology providers that have a global footprint that are citing AI as a reason for laying off workforce. I think the reality is in healthcare, we don't envision that AI is going to be replacing a licensed clinical professional. AI is going to be an input into their clinical decision making and their judgment, but it is not going to replace clinicians. We do see that there's opportunities administratively and operationally to leverage AI to become more efficient and likely become more consistent and effective for our patients. And then lastly, competency and authority. I think there is a real threat to professional autonomy that we have to confront and face and understand. And again, governance helps us do that. So I think our real challenge is how do we evolve alongside AI and how do we cultivate a workforce ultimately that can fully harness all of the capability and potential that's available with AI to help realize some of those advantages I think that we can all envision and that we're even seeing in some of the examples that have been shared today, but also understanding its limitations. And so I'll wrap up with those comments. Thank you all, and great to be with you.